I've taken great pride in the accomplishments of our people, and I think that's one thing a dean must be able to do. He must be able to get his enjoyment from the success of others.
Dick Ross grew up in the Midwest in Indiana. He went to Harvard College and then Harvard Medical School. He came to Johns Hopkins first as an Ulcer House officer, and he came with a group of friends, colleagues who made enormous achievements in academic medicine, and they worked together and they worked collaboratively.
I think Dr. Ross really put cardiology at Hopkins on the map. He reinvigorated it. He is a legend in cardiology, not just at Hopkins, but in the world.
Dr. Ross was a consummate professional. He was a wonderful researcher, teacher, and clinician. Sort of the triple threat, all embodied in this very thoughtful man who was quiet and calm and always wearing a pristine white coat. Never a crease, much less a wrinkle.
He was meticulous in the way he dressed, in the way he spoke, and in the way he presented the Johns Hopkins School of Medicine.
We surgeons at Hopkins always felt that Dick was one of us. We felt he had more of a surgical personality than he did a medical personality. He was very decisive, very self-confident, made decisions rapidly, quickly. And we felt he was one of ours. In fact, when he retired in 1990, I wrote a letter to him telling him that for the next 6 or 8 years, I was going to hold one internship slot open in case he decided he wanted to have a second career and become a surgeon.
Dick Ross, as a one-step maneuver, went from being head of cardiology with 9 people in it to being the head of the whole medical school and obviously the head of the whole campus here.
To say that Dick Ross is a tough act to follow would be an understatement. Dick's legacy at the School of Medicine here is really felt today. His focus on excellence at all levels, I think, still drives his institution. He really moved us up in many categories, but research is one that I think many of us have in mind when we think of Dick.
In my opinion, he was an absolutely superb dean. I mean, he really was helpful to junior people in getting their careers going, and he also was plenty tough about people who got out of line in any direction.
He was a dean who actually understood the need to take care of the business of medicine. And so under his watch, there was a particularly significant emphasis on growing both the clinical business as well as the research business.
He was passionate about the basic sciences and trying to glean support for the basic sciences, which was not an easy sell.
He understood what he had inherited, the legacy of Hopkins medicine and what it meant in research, teaching, patient care.
I think the medical community in general, meaning outside of Baltimore, other academic institutions, didn't have that same concept up front. But seeing what Hopkins did, they realized that, we ought to be doing that too, or we ought to at least be publicizing that, because we're all doing research, clinical care, and teaching. But it was Dick that really had the idea.
The minute he put that together for Johns Hopkins, there wasn't any question that everybody across academic medicine began thinking of themselves in terms of those 3 parameters.
When Dick took over, there hadn't been a lot of building at Hopkins. There just was an era where the school stayed the same size, the hospital stayed the same size, there wasn't a lot of building. During Dick's 15 years, I think the research space doubled here at Hopkins with buildings being built.
I think he'll be remembered for the tremendous growth that he managed. That is to say, the growth of the clinical practice, the growth of the research, but then also he, in his time, rebuilt a lot of the infrastructure.
He put Johns Hopkins on the side of this building in these enormous letters, so that when you're taking a train through Baltimore, you see it. And that was his idea too. He said, you know, we ought to make Hopkins more visible and identifiable as Johns Hopkins. So he put those letters up there.
Dick knew that our top-class faculty needed top-class facilities for their research. So the building that bears his name, I think, is still a tremendous legacy to Dick.
People make the institution. It's not the buildings and it's not the facilities, but the people. And you get the people by being very careful in the recruiting process.
Dick understood that to have a strong medical school, you needed the strongest departments. And he was actively involved in recruiting the best department chairman in the country. When people refused to come for an interview, he went to see them at their home institution, convinced them to come here. And some of our best chairmen were recruited in that way.
Mostly what he did was pick leaders, and he was good at it. I don't think he made very few, if any, mistakes in picking the departmental leadership during his 15 years.
His theory of management was, and in keeping Hopkins at the top of its game, was all about supporting the individual, but promoting the mission and always seeking excellence in everything that we do.
He never let go of the importance of enhancing our educational models of research and discovery that would make a difference to the patients in the world to come, and of focusing on outstanding clinical care. And he was such a steward of that, and selecting and recruiting people who in fact believed in that and surrounding himself with that. And I think those years of his deanship are just a mark upon the success of that philosophy that he had.
Well, he cared, and you would meet with him once a year, and he would go through your whole department. He would tell you what you're doing well, and he would tell you what you should be doing better. He made everything better.
He was so true to purpose. Conscientious doesn't do it justice. He believed so deeply and passionately about Hopkins medicine. It was never about him.
Anytime I had a difficult decision to make, anytime there was a dilemma that I had to reach up and make a decision that was going to be difficult, I would always ask myself, what would Dick want me to do? What would Dick expect of me at this time?
I think Dick Ross saw how strong basic science was becoming, how great the ideas were, how we could improve human health. And he saw that the strength at Johns Hopkins was clinical leaders who had the time and the opportunity to invest in doing clinical research and translation from the bench, if you will, to the bedside. And I don't know whether he started that expression of bench to the bedside, but he may well have begun using that expression to describe the needs of academic medicine and the kind of people they wanted to train.
The neuroscience department at Johns Hopkins has done very well. It's now, by a significant margin, the largest department in the basic sciences of the medical school, and has been highly successful. A lot of really outstanding faculty have done world-class research that's impacted neuroscience everywhere. That probably would not have happened were it not for the influence of Dr. Ross, who created our Department of Neuroscience and nurtured it so that it was one of the very first in the whole country, and very likely just about the best.
So he began single-handedly what was eventually named for him, the Richard Ross Clinical Investigator Award, which persists to this day. And it supports, really, in economic terms, the time that clinical investigators have to have in order to invest in real research and real progress.
He had to give them pilot money to get their investigations off the ground, and once they had that, one hoped that they would have results to then show to the NIH to get much bigger grants, and the money that he put into that more than paid for itself.
My recollection is that our standing, the School of Medicine standing in NIH research funding went from something like number 7 to number 1 during his time.
He was a really incisive thinker, a very clear thinker. So he could listen to a presentation and he could figure out what the key elements were in the presentation, and he could advise you, on how to present, how to make it simple, and how to do the slides and the presentation. And I've kept that with me through my whole career, and I've tried to pass that on to my trainees.
I think he was very caring, very smart, got a lot done and he didn't realize he was doing it. He was sort of under the radar screen. He wasn't what you would call play the role of the superstar, but he was very, very effective.
Ross was an inspiration to all of us. The man had a manner of way about himself, how he could interact with patients, with faculty, with fellows. There was nothing ever had to be repeated. You knew what he wanted to say, and that was it.
In 1989, he initiated a study that resulted in women faculty receiving equitable salaries to that of men. There were approximately 30 women professors in the entire history of the School of Medicine at that point. And so we started the initiative, and now we have over 200. And we can thank Dick Ross for that too.
The other thing that I've always remembered fondly when I was a fellow was Mrs. Ross, who was like the classic mother hen to the fellows. I mean, she knew everybody's names, she knew our spouses' names, she knew our kids' names.
She knows the schools in the town, which is important, and she has a wealth of Hopkins historical information about what happened when and so forth, and that's very important.
I think she was such a helpmate to him in remembering names, people he should say hello to. You'd see her coming up to him and kind of, huddling for a minute, and it was always about somebody that was there that he either didn't know or should remember to speak to, something. And she was masterful at that. So I think he counted on her a lot.
Dick Ross was a man of great integrity, and we all knew that. He wasn't playing games, he wasn't twisting things. He had a goal and a vision, and it was an honorable one, and we wanted to help him achieve that.
He had the greatest giggle in the world, and he could think the silliest things were funny. And you'd think, God, his great mind, he's laughing at that.
If it wasn't in writing, Dick Ross said it didn't exist. So you needed to get it in writing from him, and if you did, it was as good as gold.
He was a person who was always willing to reach common ground.
You always knew that whatever he told you was his best judgment, and you knew that if he told you something about the future and what he would do exactly what he said he would do.
He was my best friend of all time. And, you only have one best friend, and he was mine.
When I think of Dean Ross, the first thing that comes to my mind is one beautiful human being.
When I think of Dr. Ross, I think of someone who was an extraordinary teacher and a wonderful mentor.
The first thing that comes to mind is someone who is a really clear thinker.
I think of what a great friend he was to me during my career.
When I think about Dr. Ross, I think about fulfilling the potential of cardiology at Johns Hopkins.
When I think of Dick Ross, I think of someone who was meticulous.
Honest, forthright.
Supportive. Whenever I think of Dick Ross, the first word that comes to my mind is leadership.
trust.
Integrity.
When I think of Dr. Ross, I think how grateful I am that our paths crossed.
When I think of Dr. Ross, I think of integrity and the embodiment of all the greatest values of the Johns Hopkins tradition.
When I think of Dr. Ross, I think of the person that was my best friend of all the people I've known.